I could feel the heat of my father's office as I stood there, my breath caught in my throat. He'd just finished telling me the company's newest strategy, which, in a way that only he could, made it sound so legitimate. Professional. But I knew the truth. I'd been raised in the heart of the empire he'd built, and I'd watched for years as people like me were quietly pushed aside, and now I was standing there with the very evidence in front of me. "They're being let go, Jordan," he had said, leaning back in his chair with that infuriating calmness, as though firing long-time employees based on their race was just another routine. "It's just business. You should understand that by now." I had stood there too stunned for words before finally managing to choke out, "What do you mean, just business?" He looked at me like I was the naive one. "You really want to get into this? It's nothing personal. It's just the way things work. You're too close to the problem to see it, but sometimes cutting off dead weight is necessary." Dead weight? I felt like a rock had lodged itself in my throat, and I wanted to scream, but all I could do was nod, my thoughts racing. Dead weight? That's what he called people who'd been loyal for years? I turned on my heel and left his office. I needed to breathe. The cool hallway hit me like a slap in the face. I leaned against the wall, fighting tears. My father had always been cold, distant even. But this was something else. He had always told me that business was about numbers, not people. But I never thought he meant it this way. Emily, my best friend since childhood, was walking down the hall when she spotted me, her face lighting up with a smile. But when she saw my face, her smile faltered. "Jordan? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost?" I swallowed hard. I hadn't told Emily about any of this yet. I hadn't even been able to process it myself. But she was my best friend. I needed her to understand. I needed someone to know the truth. "You don't get it, do you, Emily?" My voice came out more broken than I intended, and I could feel the anger bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. My father's a racist, and I just have to sit here pretending I don't know. Emily's face dropped, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you talking about? Your dad?" I nodded, swallowing down the bitterness in my throat. I can't even say it out loud. How do I even say it out loud? I overheard him talking to the board. "They're firing people, long-time employees, people of color, Emily, just because he can." Her mouth opened and closed as though she didn't know how to respond. I didn't blame her. How could she? She'd never had to live with this. She'd never had to watch her own family make decisions. Like this, decisions that rip through lives as if they meant nothing. He can't be that bad, can he?" Emily whispered. Like saying it aloud would somehow make it worse. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You have no idea what it's like to see someone you love act like that. It's not just about business, Emily. It's not just numbers and strategies. It's people, my people, and he's the one throwing them away." "You're really going to confront him, aren't you?" she asked, her voice small, like she was afraid of the answer. I met her eyes, my stomach sinking. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I can't just let this go. I need to understand. I need to know if this is who he really is, or if I've been blind all this time." I turned away from her before she could say anything more. I had to think. I needed answers, but I wasn't going to get them just standing here, pacing in the hallway. Later that night, I found myself at the company again, standing in the janitor's closet, staring at the plain cleaning supplies in front of me. I didn't belong here. I'd never imagined that I would be here, at the bottom, but it was the only way I could see things clearly, the only way to understand what my father had done. I heard footsteps approaching, and I quickly grabbed a broom, making sure to look. Busy. It was Marcus, a janitor who worked nights. I had seen him around, but we had never really spoken. He glanced at me with a wary look, then nodded. "You knew?" he asked, his voice low but friendly. Yeah, I said, keeping my head down. Just started today. He raised an eyebrow. I don't think I've seen you before. You don't look like you belong here. I laughed softly, the sound feeling alien in my own ears. Don't belong here? I didn't even belong in my own life anymore. Guess you could say that. I muttered, still sweeping the floor. My hands were shaking, but I hoped he didn't notice. Just trying to understand how everything works around here. From the ground up. Marcus didn't respond right away. He just stared at me like he was waiting for me to say more. I wasn't sure if I wanted to say more, but I couldn't help myself. They're firing people, Marcus. People who've been here for years. You know why? His face tightened, his eyes flicking toward me. You mean the ones they sent home? Yeah, I heard. Doesn't surprise me none. You know what they say around here. If you're not in the right clique, you don't matter. The words hit me like a slap. I had heard them too. But hearing them from Marcus, someone who lived it every day, made it all the more real. Is that what it is? Just cliques? Marcus's face darkened. It's more than that. You're either useful or you're not. And if they don't need you anymore, they'll toss you like trash. You don't have to be blind to see that. I felt the heat in my chest, the anger bubbling up again. How could he be so cold about it? How could my father be so cold? I stood there, frozen for a moment before I muttered, "What does it feel like? To be invisible in a place you built?" Marcus didn't answer. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. I didn't need him to answer. I knew the truth now. I had known it for years, but now it was louder, clearer, and unbearable. I was invisible, just like everyone else who looked like me. And I had built my life on this invisible foundation. I couldn't stay in this world any longer. I had to find a way to make them see us, make them hear us. And if I had to bring this company down to do it, then so be it. I hate the smell of the cleaning supplies in this place. It's a mix of chemicals that sting my nose and a faint, musty odor from years of neglect. I didn't expect to be here. I didn't expect to be invisible, scrubbing floors and hiding behind cleaning supplies. But this is how I see it now. If I want to understand, really understand what's going on here, I have to start from the bottom. I heard the scuff of shoes on the linoleum, and I turned around just in time to see Marcus, one of the janitors, dragging his mop across the floor. His face was a mask of weariness, the kind that comes from years of being overlooked. He didn't look at me at first, but when he finally did, there was a slight pause, a flicker of recognition before he moved on. I hadn't spoken to him much before, but something in his tired eyes told me he knew the unspoken rules of this company. Keep your head down. Work hard. Don't complain. He stopped, his mop dragging a little slower now. You're new here, huh? His voice was a little too low, almost like he was afraid of speaking too loudly. Yeah, I said, pushing the mop back and forth, keeping my eyes trained on the floor, just trying to figure it out. He nodded, though his face remained unreadable. You'll figure it out soon enough. They'll tell you where you belong. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I wasn't in the mood for guessing games. I needed to know why the place felt off, why every employee of color had this hidden pain in their eyes. I needed answers, and if Marcus wasn't going to give them to me, I'd have to find them myself. Later that day, I overheard a conversation between a group of employees in the break room. My heart sank as I recognized the words they were saying. Words of disappointment, frustration, and resignation. They were talking about promotions. I've been here for 8 years, man, one of them said. And she still gave the promotion to Tom. Tom! He doesn't even know how to do half the stuff we do. The other worker's voice was heavy with defeat. It's always the same. You work your ass off and they give it to someone else, someone who fits their profile. He emphasized the word, bitterness leaking through. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it impossible to breathe. My eyes drifted to the door, and I could see Marcus standing there, leaning against the counter as he quietly listened. He caught my gaze, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. I don't even care anymore, the first man continued, throwing his hands up in the air. I'm just going to keep my head down and collect my paycheck. That's all they see me as anyway. A paycheck. Yeah, the other man muttered. That's all they want. They don't care about us. We're just disposable. My stomach twisted, and I could feel the anger bubbling up in my chest. I wasn't surprised. I'd heard enough stories like this to know what was happening, but hearing it so plainly in the open made it hit me harder. This was it. This was the quiet, insidious racism that ran through the veins of this company. Marcus pushed off from the counter and walked over to me, his face hard and unreadable. It's like they don't even see us, he said quietly. They pretend like they do, but they don't. They never do. I didn't know how to respond. What could I say to that? I see you, Marcus. I see what they're doing to you. But I didn't know how to say it out loud. It felt like everything was suffocating me, like I was being crushed by the weight of their indifference. I worked harder than any of them, Marcus continued, his voice getting louder now. But they still look at me like I'm just nothing. They never see me. Never. And when I speak out, they just shut me down. They don't want to hear it. His words hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I couldn't imagine how it felt to pour everything into your work, to give it everything. You had and still be invisible. It made my chest tighten, my heart breaking for him and for all the others who had been crushed by this system. How many people have to die inside just to feed the machine? I thought, barely able to keep the words in my head. But I couldn't. Let this go. I couldn't keep pretending like nothing was wrong. I had to speak up. I had to do something. A few days later, I found myself back in my father's office. I'd stayed quiet for a while, letting the silence in my head drown out the noise of everything else. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not when the faces of the people I had seen suffering were burned into my mind. Not when I knew what was happening, and I wasn't doing anything about it. I pushed the door open, and Mr. Whitaker looked up from his desk, his expression cold and distant as always. "You wanted to talk?" he asked, his voice flat. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at him, my father, the man who had built this empire on the backs of people like Marcus, people like me, people he never truly saw. "I hear everything, Father," I said, my voice steady, but there was a tightness in my chest that I couldn't shake. "You think I can't tell who's being passed over for that promotion? You think I don't see the pattern?" He looked at me, his lips curling into that familiar smirk, the one that always made me feel like I was a child again, small and insignificant. "You're overreacting, Jordan. It's business. You can't make everyone happy. That's just the way it is." "That's the way it is?" I could feel the anger rising in me, the need to scream, to make him understand. But I kept my voice calm. I had to. If I didn't, it would be over before it started. "You're wrong," I said, my words coming out slow, deliberate. "This isn't just business. You're making decisions that affect people's lives, and you're doing it based on race. I can't pretend I don't see that anymore." His expression faltered just for a second, and I could tell he didn't expect this, but he quickly masked it as always. "You're being naive, Jordan. You need to understand the bigger picture." "The bigger picture?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "The bigger picture is that people like Marcus will never get a fair shot. They're invisible here, and you're the one making them disappear." For a moment, the room was silent. Just us, standing on opposite sides. My father's silence spoke volumes. It was the silence of someone who had never truly looked at the people around him, never truly seen the damage he caused. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that silence. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. I didn't expect to feel like this, like everything I knew was slipping away and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But here I was, staring at the mess of everything that used to feel so solid, the company, my father, my family, and I didn't know how much of it I could keep pretending to believe in. I met Emily at lunch in the break room, my stomach in knots. She didn't know what was really going on, not all of it, but I couldn't keep this from her, not anymore. She was my best friend, but I wasn't sure where we stood anymore. "Jordan, what's going on with you?" she asked, voice softer than usual. "You've been distant." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I didn't want to feel this way, but I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know the truth. "I don't care if he's my father, Emily," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "The things he's done, he's not the man I thought he was." Emily blinked, taken aback by the force of my words. She was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling to find the right thing to say. "What do you mean?" "His decisions, the firings, the racism in the company. It's not just business, Emily. It's personal, and it's wrong. He doesn't see them. He doesn't see me, and I've been playing along, pretending everything's fine. But it's not fine. It's never been fine." Her silence was heavy. She didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to say to make this feel less real. Maybe she didn't want to believe it, and maybe I didn't either. But it was happening. I had heard it from the employees. I had felt it in the air. And now, I had to face it. "Jordan," she said, voice trembling just a little. "He's your father. I know he's hard to understand sometimes, but that doesn't mean he's—" "You don't get it, Emily," I interrupted, cutting her off. "He's been doing this his whole life, and I've been too afraid to see it. But now, I can't unsee it." She opened her mouth to argue, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't ready to hear this, not from me, not about someone she admired. "I'm done pretending, Emily," I muttered, my voice quieter now. "I'm done." I stood, up, not waiting for her reply. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't pretend with her anymore. The tension between us was too thick, and I could feel the walls closing in. That evening, I found myself at the back of the building again, mopping the floors, trying to ground myself in the rhythmic motion of it all. But my mind wouldn't stop. My father, the company. Everything was tangled together in a mess of lies and deceit, and I didn't know which direction to go anymore. I could feel someone watching me, and I turned to find Marcus standing there, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. I hadn't seen him much since the other day, but now he was here as if drawn by the weight of everything I was feeling. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked after a while, his voice gruff but caring. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just—" I trailed off, not sure how to explain it. "Everything's just too much right now." Marcus took a slow step forward, still watching me closely. "I get it," he said, his voice low. "This place, it messes with your head. They don't see us. They never do. It's like we're invisible, like we're just part of the background noise." His words hit me in the chest, like he was putting into words everything I had been trying to understand, everything I had seen but couldn't articulate. "They'll never care about us," he continued, his eyes dark with frustration. "They only care about how much we can do for them, how much they can take from us. And the minute we stop being useful, they'll toss us aside. You don't have to be blind to see that." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing with every word he spoke. It was true. It was always true. I'd seen it, I'd felt it, but hearing him say it out loud made it all too real. I felt a fire starting to burn in me, not from anger, but from something deeper. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. "I can't stay silent," I said, my voice stronger now, the decision forming in my chest. "I can't let this continue. Not anymore." Marcus's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something I couldn't quite read. You think you can change it? You think you can change this place? I nodded slowly. I have to try. He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. You might not win. You might break yourself trying. But you gotta do what you gotta do. He turned to leave, and I watched him go, his words settling deep inside me. Maybe I won't win, but I can't let it keep happening. Later that night, I stood outside my father's office again, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was a blur of thoughts and emotions, each one pulling me in a different direction. But I knew what I had to do. I knocked lightly on the door, then stepped inside before he could answer. He was sitting behind his desk, the same cold, calculated look on his face. When he saw me, he didn't even blink. "What is it now, Jordan?" I felt the words rise in me, thick and heavy, as I walked forward, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I'm done, Father. I won't be your puppet anymore, not after this." His eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of surprise there, like he wasn't used to seeing me stand up to him. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." I stood tall, trying to hold on to the rage that was coursing through me. "I've seen the way you treat people. I've seen the way you make decisions that hurt people just because you can. And I won't be a part of it anymore." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, each of us waiting for the other to break. But I wouldn't break. Not this time. "You can't change everything, Jordan," he finally said, his voice cold, dismissive. "It's business. You'll understand when you get older." I shook my head. "No, I understand perfectly. You just don't care." And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving my father's world behind me. For the first time, I felt like I was finally free. I had thought about this moment 1,000 times. Each time I hesitated, unsure of how much of the truth I could bear to share, unsure of how much I could lose. But now, standing in front of Marcus, feeling the weight of the secret press against my chest, I knew I couldn't hold it in any longer. Not with everything that had happened. Not when I knew how much pain I had caused him by pretending to be someone I wasn't. I met Marcus by the back exit after my shift. I could hear the clatter of the mop bucket as he set it down, the usual hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, but everything else felt suffocatingly silent. This was it. I had to tell him. He looked up when I walked in, a hint of surprise crossing his face, but it quickly faded into his usual guarded expression. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone neutral. But I could see the way he was standing, waiting for something. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I took a deep breath. "Here goes nothing. I need you to understand something," I started, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm Jordan Whitaker, your boss's daughter. I've been lying to you this whole time." The words felt like they were burning my throat, like I was confessing something unforgivable. His eyes widened, but he didn't speak immediately. Instead, he took a step back, his face unreadable. For a moment, the silence between us was deafening. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to figure out if I was serious, if I was lying. You're his daughter?" he asked, his voice quiet but edged with disbelief. I nodded. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribcage, but I couldn't stop now. Not when the weight of everything was pressing on me, not when I knew I had to own this. "Yeah, and I didn't tell you because I was too ashamed. I was too scared of what you'd think of me, of what you'd think of my father, but I can't hide from this anymore. I can't pretend it's not happening. The way they treat you, the way they treat all of you, it's wrong, Marcus. And I'm sorry I've been part of it." He took another step back, shaking his head. His lips pressed tightly together. "So you've been lying to me this whole time?" His voice was cold now, distant, like I had just torn down everything between us. I nodded again, my throat tight. "Yes, I have. And I can't apologize enough for that." The disappointment on his face stung more than I expected. I had seen anger in his eyes before, but this felt like something deeper. It felt like I had broken a bond that was never going to be the same again. I watched as he stepped away from me, his face hardening. "That's a hell of a thing to admit, Jordan," he muttered. "I don't know what you want from me now. I needed to tell you. I needed you to know I didn't choose this. I didn't choose him." He turned away, leaning against the wall. I don't know what to say to that. I don't know what to do with that. His voice broke on the last word, and I could hear the pain in it, the rawness that I'd been blind to before. "I can't change the past," I said softly. "But I want to change how I move forward. I want to make things right, for you, for everyone else." He didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You don't get it, do you? It's not about what you can do for me. It's about what your father's done to all of us. And now you expect me to just forget everything because you tell me you're sorry?" His tone was incredulous, and I knew I deserved every bit of it. "You don't get to come in here and fix things with a few words, Jordan. You've been a part of the problem for so long. What makes you think I'd trust you now?" I wanted to argue, to tell him that I was different, that I wasn't like my father, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Not when he was right. Not when. My actions, my silence, had been complicit in all of this. "I can't expect you to forgive me," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "But I can show you that I'll fight for what's right, not for him, not for this company, but for people like you." Marcus stared at me for a long time, his eyes narrowing slightly, as though he was still trying to figure me out. But then, he exhaled sharply and I could see the walls coming back up. "Whatever you say, Jordan, I'm not sure it changes anything. But good luck." And with that, he walked away, leaving me standing in the silence, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. I wanted to shout, to chase after him, but I knew it was pointless. I had no right to make him understand. Not yet. I barely slept that night. The conversation with Marcus played on a loop in my head, the disappointment in his eyes, the coldness in his voice. But as the hours dragged on, something shifted inside me. I was tired of hiding, tired of letting my father's world control me. The next morning, I walked into my father's office without hesitation, without the usual fear that always held me back. I had made my decision. It was time to confront him, to face the man who had built an empire on the backs of people like Marcus. He looked up from his papers when I walked in, his usual cold demeanor never wavering. "What is it now, Jordan?" he asked, voice flat, as though he was bored with me already. "I'm done pretending, Father," I said, my voice steady but full of the rage I had kept bottled up for far too long. "I'm done following your rules. I'm done being part of this system." He didn't even blink. "You're overreacting," he said dismissively, like it was all beneath him. "The world's unfair, but I don't make the rules. I just follow them." His words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "You followed them straight into the grave of your own soul," I said, my voice quieter now, but firm. "And I'm not going with you. Not anymore." For a moment he just stared at me, his eyes cold and unreadable. But I saw something flicker in his gaze. Fear, maybe. Or maybe just surprise that I had the nerve to stand up to him, but I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and walked out, leaving him there in his office, the walls closing in around him like they always did when the truth finally found its way in. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him win. Not anymore. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach as I walked toward my father's office. I knew what was coming. He'd been quiet for a few days, but I could see the storm building. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand there pretending. I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. I had to do this. I had to confront him, even if it meant tearing apart everything I thought I understood about my family. I knocked lightly, then stepped in before he could respond. The usual. Coolness washed over me like a cold wave as I took in the sterile space, his kingdom, his fortress. The place where everything felt controlled, orderly, and perfect, except for the people he discarded like trash. "Sit down, Jordan," he said, not looking up from his desk. I could hear the edge in his voice, the impatience he had for anything. That didn't suit his agenda. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Not this time. "I'm done, Father," I said, the words slipping out with a finality that surprised even me. "I'm done with this. With you. With everything." He finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Done with what, exactly?" "With all of it." I threw my hands up, the frustration bubbling over. "You can't keep pretending this isn't about race. You can't just hide behind your business jargon and act like this isn't a personal choice. I've seen you do it for years. I've heard the way you talk about people like Marcus, like they're disposable." I could see his jaw tighten. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to being confronted like this. Good, I thought. He needed to feel it. He needed to understand that I wasn't going to back down. "You think this is about race, Jordan?" he asked, his voice low, trying to suppress his anger. "You think that's what I care about? You're wrong. You're naive, and you're playing with fire." I took a step forward, my hands trembling with the weight of everything I was about to say. "It's not fire I'm playing with," I said, my voice growing stronger, more certain. "It's justice, and I'll burn everything you've built, down to the ground if I have to." His eyes flickered for a moment, and I saw something shift in him. But he quickly regained control, his mask slipping back into place. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp and calculating. "You don't understand business, Jordan," he said, his tone condescending, like he was explaining something to a child. "This is how the world works. It's not about feelings or ideals. You can't change things with your emotions. You can't change things with ideals. Emotions." I could feel the anger rising in me, the hot burning frustration that had been building up for so long. "Emotions," he said. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear everything down. But instead, I took a deep breath and forced the words out through gritted teeth. "You're wrong," I said quietly, but with a force that surprised even me. "It's not about business. It's about people. And if you can't see that, then I'm done. I'm done being a part of this lie." He didn't respond at first, and the silence stretched out between us. I could feel the weight of the words I had just said, the weight of the truth settling in the air like smoke. I didn't know what he would do next, what he would say. I had never seen him like this, unsettled, unsure. I hated that I had made him feel that way, but I wasn't done. Not yet. "You want to talk about the world, Father?" I said, my voice rising again. "The world is changing, and you can't keep hiding behind your business deals. You can't keep silencing people just because they don't fit into your neat little box. I'm done pretending that I don't see it." His eyes flashed, his calm facade cracking. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jordan," he warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know who you're dealing with. This isn't something you can just fix by making noise. This isn't something you can solve by stirring up trouble." I shook my head, the anger that had been simmering inside me for so long finally breaking through. "I don't need you to fix anything. I need you to see the people you've been, stepping on. I need you to see the truth." He stood up, his movements sharp and precise, like a predator about to pounce. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't understand the pressure, the responsibility. You think you can just waltz in here and change everything, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. You can't. You'll ruin everything." I stood my ground, refusing to back down. "Maybe it needs to be ruined. Maybe everything you've built needs to fall apart so you can see who you've become." He sneered, his face twisted with contempt. "You're naive, and you'll regret this. Trust me." As his words hung in the air, I could feel the familiar weight of doubt creeping in. My father had always been able to make me question myself, to make me feel like I was overreacting, like I was wrong for standing up for what I believed in. But this time, I wasn't going to let him win. "I don't care what you think," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. He stared at me, his gaze hard and unyielding, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't backing down. Finally, he spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're making a huge mistake, Jordan. I hope you realize that." "I realize it. I just don't care anymore." I left his office, feeling like I had just stepped out of a war zone. I wasn't sure if I had won, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the right side of things. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But I had taken the first step, and I wasn't going to stop. I walked down the hallway, my mind racing, when I bumped into Emily. She looked at me with wide eyes, her face filled with concern. "Jordan, what happened?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell her everything, but part of me knew that I had already said enough for now. "He's not who I thought he was, Emily," I said, my voice quiet. "And I don't think I can ever go back." Her eyes softened, but I could see the worry in them. "He's your father, Jordan. Don't you see? This will tear you apart. It's not worth it." I shook my head, the weight of her words settling on my shoulders. "Maybe it's worth it, Emily. Maybe it's worth everything." And with that, I walked away, knowing that the hardest part was still ahead. The first time I walked into that law office, I was shaking. I didn't know if it was the cold air or the weight of what I was about to do that made my hands tremble. This was real now. This wasn't just me standing up to my father in private. This was me taking the fight to his doorstep, to the one thing he couldn't control, the law. Marcus was sitting across from me, his face unreadable as he stared down at the papers in front of him. The lawyer, a tall man in a crisp suit, had already explained the basics. We had a case, and it was solid, but I could see the hesitation in Marcus's eyes, the same doubt I felt gnawing at my insides. Could we really do this? Could I really take down my father? The lawyer broke the silence. "Jordan, Marcus, the case is strong. Discrimination is illegal, and the evidence you've provided, it's enough to get us in front of a judge." Marcus glanced up, his voice rough. "But what happens if we lose? What happens to us?" I felt the weight of his words. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about all the people my father had trampled on, about all the lives he had ruined, with his arrogance. "We won't lose," I said, trying to sound confident, even though doubt was eating away at me. "This isn't about winning or losing. This is about what's right, about making sure no one else suffers because of him." I could see Marcus struggle with that. His eyes were tired, like he'd been carrying this burden alone for far too long. "You're not doing this just for me, are you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "You're doing this for every single person who's been stomped on by these systems. This is bigger than us." I nodded, my throat tightening. "This is for all of us. For everyone he's hurt." The lawyer gave a sharp nod, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "The next step is the courtroom. We'll need you both to be prepared for some tough questions. Mr. Whitaker's lawyers will come out swinging." I leaned back, trying to steady my breathing. "I'm ready. I've been ready for a long time." The day of the trial, my heart felt like it was pounding in my throat. I was walking into the lion's den. My father's lawyers were all ready, set up, all polished and clean, like they had everything under control. The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of papers being shuffled, the low murmur of voices. But all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. I glanced over at Marcus, who was sitting beside me, his jaw clenched tight. He didn't belong here, not in this space where power and money ruled everything. But I had dragged him into this. I had dragged all of us into this. My father stepped into the room with that cold, controlled demeanor he always wore like armor. The instant I saw him, a chill ran down my spine. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not like I had been. The trial started, and I sat there listening to my father's lawyer spin his lies, trying to bury the truth under a mountain of legal jargon. They twisted the facts, tried to make it sound like everything that had happened was just a misunderstanding, that the firings weren't racially motivated, that it was just business. At one point, my father himself took the stand. I could see him glaring at me from across the room, his eyes hard and cold. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The mask was gone. "This is a business," he said, his voice booming in the quiet courtroom. "You can't throw emotions at numbers. That's not how this works, Jordan." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I heard his words, the same words I had heard 1,000 times. "It's just business," he would always say. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Not to me. "I'm not throwing emotions at numbers," I said, my voice shaking with the effort it took to stay calm. "I'm throwing the truth at you. And that's something you can't hide behind your money and power." The judge raised an eyebrow, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him silence me. I wasn't going to let him silence any of us. Turned to Marcus, who was sitting there, his eyes intense, his fists clenched in his lap. I could see it in his face. The same determination that I felt coursing through my veins. When it was finally my turn to speak, I stood up, my knees trembling but my voice steady. "I never wanted any of this," I began, my voice cutting through the silence. "I never wanted to stand here to watch my father's empire crumble, but I'm done pretending. I'm done letting him pretend that this is just about business. This is about people. It's about the lives he's destroyed, the people he's stepped on, the ones he's ignored because they didn't fit into his perfect world. And I can't let that continue. I won't." My words hung in the air for a moment, and I could feel the weight of them pressing down on everyone in the room. I saw my father shift uncomfortably in his seat, and for a moment, I almost thought I saw something break in him. But then it was gone, replaced by the same cold mask. "You may have the money and the power," I continued, my voice rising now, gaining strength. "But we have the truth, and that's something you can't buy." The room was silent for a moment. My father's lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but the judge raised a hand to stop him. I didn't care what they said anymore. I had said what needed to be said. I sat back down, my heart racing. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right side of things. The truth was out there now. I had said it, and nothing, not even my father, could take that away from me. Marcus turned to me, his face softening just a little. "You did good," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too busy thinking about what came next, because I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The morning after the trial felt like walking into a storm that had already torn everything apart. The headlines were everywhere. Whistleblower daughter exposes CEO's racist practices, and the online backlash was deafening. The company's stock was plummeting. Employees were leaking their own stories of mistreatment, and my father's empire, the one he'd spent decades building, was crumbling before his eyes. I sat in my apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me, like a physical force. I could still hear the words from the trial echoing in my mind. "You may have the money and the power, but we have the truth." I hadn't realized just how powerful those words would be, how they would shift everything, not just in the courtroom, but in the world beyond it. I hadn't talked to my father since that day. Part of me wondered if he would even acknowledge what was happening, if he would try to fix it. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't. He didn't fix things. He manipulated them. And I wasn't going to let him do that to me, not anymore. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "We need to talk," he texted. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket and left. When I walked into the cafe, Marcus was already sitting at the back table, his eyes focused on his phone but his expression distant. I could tell he hadn't been sleeping much. Neither had I. The weight of everything still felt like it was suffocating me, like I was standing in the ruins of something I couldn't quite put together. I slid into the chair across from him. His eyes lifted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something in them. Hope. Real hope. Not the kind of hope I used to see when I was still looking for ways to fix the unfixable. "We did it, didn't we?" he said, his voice hoarse. "We really did it." I nodded, but the words felt hollow coming out of my mouth. "Yeah, we did. But now what?" Marcus's eyes softened as he leaned forward. "Now we rebuild, Jordan. We rebuild what your father destroyed. We rebuild what he never cared about." I swallowed hard. "It's falling apart, Marcus. The company, everything. It's all falling apart." He smiled, but there was no joy in it. Only the quiet knowledge that things were finally shifting, for the first time in years. That's exactly what needs to happen. Your father built this empire on lies, on ignoring people like us. You've given the world a chance to finally see that. I looked down at my hands, trying to push down the unease that was rising in me. "But it's not just the company, Marcus. It's my father, my family, everything I've known. He's losing everything. And I don't know what to feel anymore." Marcus's voice softened. "I know it's hard, but you have to look at what you've done. You've given people their voice. You've given them a chance to speak out. It's not about your father anymore. It's about the people who've been silenced for too long." I could feel the guilt rising in my chest, the weight of what I had just done. But what about him? He's my father. I'm not sure if I can live with this, with what's happening to him. Marcus's expression turned serious. "Jordan, you're not fighting for him. You never were. You're fighting for everyone he's hurt, and for yourself, too." I stared at him, unsure of what to say. I've been so focused on trying to fix things, trying to make him see me, that I never thought about what I was letting him do to everyone else. I didn't even see it. But now I can't go back. I can't be that person anymore. Marcus's voice was filled with quiet resolve. "That's the person you've always been. It just took you a while to realize it. But now you're free. And so are the people who've been crushed under his weight." The next day, my father called. I knew it was coming. He'd been quiet, hiding behind his lawyers and PR team, trying to salvage whatever was left of his reputation. But this call was inevitable. He was ready to fight back. I just didn't know how. When I picked up, I could hear the tension in his voice. "Jordan," he began, his tone calm but clipped. "I need to see you. We need to talk about all of this." I almost laughed. Talk? About what? About how he had spent years destroying lives just to climb higher? About how he had treated me like a pawn in his game? What was left to say? "I don't think there's anything left to talk about, Father," I said, my voice steady, even though my insides were screaming. "I'm not fighting for you anymore. You've built your empire on the backs of people like me. It's time. It falls apart." There was a long silence on the other end, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for making him face the truth. "You're making a huge mistake, Jordan," he finally said, his voice strained with anger and disbelief. "I'm done making mistakes for you," I replied. "And this isn't a mistake. It's a reckoning." I hung up before he could say anything else. I didn't need to hear it. He was never going to understand, and frankly, I didn't care anymore. A few days later, the company announced mass layoffs, a restructuring of the executive team, and a public apology from my father. But I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. The damage had been done. My father's empire was in shambles, and while it was a victory for the employees, for the people like Marcus who had suffered under his rule, it was a hollow victory for me. I had lost my family. I had lost the man I thought I knew. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing myself. Marcus called that night. "We've been waiting for this moment, Jordan," he said, his voice full of quiet conviction. "Now it's our turn to make a difference." I felt a surge of strength, of something deeper than the guilt and fear that had consumed me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. "Yeah," I said, my voice firm. "Now it's our turn." And for the first time, I believed it. The day of the reckoning felt like the air was holding its breath. It wasn't just the press conference or the public backlash. It was everything I had been carrying, everything I had seen, felt, and fought for. This moment had been coming for a long time, and I could feel the weight of it settling in my chest. The company had called a meeting, something about an apology and a fresh start. But I knew it wasn't that simple. I had watched my father manipulate the world around him for years, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. Not just for what he'd done to me, but for all the people he'd stepped on without ever blinking an eye. I walked into the conference room with my head held high, the tension thick in the air. The reporters were there, cameras flashing, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was what was about to unfold. My father was sitting at the front, his usual icy calm, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew this was it, the end of the line for him. I took a seat at the table, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, trying to keep steady. Behind me, Marcus was watching intently, standing next to me like a silent reminder of everything I had fought for. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The moment the microphone was passed to my father, I could feel the shift in the room. He stood, adjusted his tie, and gave the crowd his usual polished smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His voice was calm, too calm, but I could hear the cracks in it. "I know my actions have caused harm," he started, his words rehearsed, like he had memorized this speech 1,000 times. "I've been wrong. I didn't realize how far I'd gone, how much damage I'd caused, and for that, I am truly sorry." His apology felt empty, a script he had memorized, a line he had been forced to deliver. I wanted to scream, to tell the world what he had done, but I stayed silent, watching him dig his own grave. "I didn't know how far I'd gone until you made me see it," he continued, his eyes flicking to me for just a second. "It's too late, though. I can't change what I've done." The words hit me like a slap, but they didn't have the sting they once would have. "Too late?" I repeated quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "It's never too late, but it's too late for you." His eyes narrowed as he turned to look at me, but I wasn't going to back down. I had already chosen. I had already decided who I was fighting for. "You think you can just apologize, that it'll fix everything?" I stood up, my voice steady, cutting through the room like a knife. "You've spent your whole life thinking that your money, your power, could make people disappear. You've been a coward, hiding behind your empire, refusing to see the damage you've caused." His face flushed with anger, but I didn't flinch. "You think you've changed? You think this speech will erase the years of hurt, the years of people being crushed by your business decisions?" I took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. "No, you're not sorry, you're scared." He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand, cutting him off. "It's too late, Father. I've already made my choice." I glanced over at Marcus, who gave me a small, reassuring nod. His eyes were filled with pride, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting this alone. "You've spent so long living in a world where your money buys you everything," I continued, my voice strong. But you can't buy the truth. You can't buy redemption. And you sure as hell can't buy the people you've harmed. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The room had become still, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. My father's face twisted, anger and regret warring on his features. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to defend himself anymore. "You've built your empire on the backs of people like me," I said, my voice shaking now with the force of everything I had held in for so long. "And I'm not going to let you get away with it. Not anymore." He looked at me, his face softening for the briefest second. "Jordan, I never meant for it to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "You've hurt everyone, Father. You just don't care." And then finally he broke. His posture slumped, his face falling as though the weight of everything finally crushed him. He didn't have a response. All the anger, all the power, all the control he'd held for so long had evaporated, leaving only the empty shell of a man who thought he could never be touched. "I don't know how to fix this," he murmured, his voice trembling. "You can't fix it," I said, my heart pounding. "Not this time." I turned to face the reporters, my back straight, my hands still shaking but my resolve stronger than ever. "It's time someone held people like him accountable," I said, addressing the room. "The world doesn't need more people who think they can control others. It needs truth. It needs justice. And it's about time we give it to them." After the conference, I stood there in the aftermath, surrounded by the chaos of the fallout. The press was relentless, but for the first time I didn't feel afraid. I felt free. My father's empire was crumbling, yes, but I wasn't losing anything anymore. I had gained my voice. I had gained the courage to stand up, and I wasn't going to stop now. Marcus came up behind me, his voice quiet but steady. "You did it. Jordan, you showed them." I turned to him, meeting his eyes, and I knew this was just the beginning. "We did it," I corrected, my voice filled with something new, something I had never allowed myself to feel before. "Now it's our turn," Marcus said, and for the first time, I knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't just about one battle. It was about the war that still needed to be fought. And I was ready.